Today I'm starting a playlist about the new features and unresolved issues in Logic Pro 11. And to begin, we're going to look at the new AI session players. I'm gonna see if I can get them to play nicely with some pre-recorded music that I've made, and I'm also gonna see how well they can act as a sort of sketch pad for new ideas. For those of you new to Logic Pro, I will explain every step that I take along the way, so let's get started. Okay, so after opening up Logic Pro, we're met with the traditional startup window, except that there's a new option to create a session player track, which I'll get to in a minute. But first I'm going to add my audio tracks, which I recorded earlier, and I'm just going to dump them in, create new tracks, and I'm just going to adjust the project tempo to 166, which is what these were recorded to. And today's example is just a snippet from a full song of mine called Cinnamon Sun, which you can find literally nowhere. And what we have here is just a lead guitar, a group of acoustic guitars, and a group of background vocals. I'm not going to play this through just yet. There's going to be plenty of examples along the way. And I'm just going to do a quick little mix between the elements, and I'll be right back. All right, so I got this cleaned up. And real quick, if you haven't done this, then you're going to want to enable the complete features in Logic Pro. So just go up to Settings, go to Advanced, and make sure that the Enable Complete Features button is selected. And if you want to follow along with me, then go to General, go to Editing, and make sure that where it says Pointer Tool in Tracks Provides, make sure that all these are clicked. Fade Tool click zones, Marquee Tool click zones, Quick Swipe and Take Editing click zones. So before we add any session players, we need to tell Logic what the arrangement of our track is, as well as what chords our instruments are playing. So I'm just gonna click right here, and that brings up our global tracks menu. So Logic always defaults to the key of C. So this song is actually in G major. So what we wanna do is go to our global signature track and click on C where it says C. We wanna change that to G major. Okay, now I can get rid of this. I'm going to get rid of markers, and I'm not going to touch tempo anymore. So these are the most important two right now. So in the beginning, I just have this guitar playing by itself. And then everything else will come in on bar 4. So this is where our arrangement will begin. I'm just going to drag this over. But I do need to fill in this blank space. So I'll just call this nothing. Now you're given the options between intro, verse, chorus, bridge, and outro. And if this were a full song that was going to build up over time into a big chorus with subdued verses, then I would be going about this a little bit differently. However, it starts right away after this little guitar intro with a full band. So I'm not gonna call that an intro, I'm gonna call it a verse, so that the AI session players know to play a little bit harder there. Then, when these vocals come in, I'm going to mark a new section, drag that out until the end, and I'll call this the chorus. And as far as our example goes, that's all we need to do. And we can move on to the chord section, and we can begin writing in our chords. So I'm going to click on Create Chord, and our first chord is just G major. So I'm just going to leave that how it is. And then next bar, we have a new chord. I can right click and create new chord. I'm gonna call this, that's a C major. And then for 2 bars after that, we have an E minor. And the root note is just E, so we'll change the major to minor. And it's as easy as that. However, it is a little time consuming, so I'll fill out the rest of our example myself, and I'll be back in a minute. All right, so I finished mapping out our chords, and sometimes you have to get really specific with what you want your AI session players to play. For example, here I marked this chord as a G major with a B in the bass. So the B would be playing underneath the G. And what that will do is it will hopefully force our bass player to play a B. I did the same thing here. The chord is D, but I want to force an F sharp in the bass. So I put D with an F sharp in the bass. Okay, so now we can actually start adding our session players. I'm gonna go to Track, New Session Player, and I'm gonna start with our drummer. And today I have everything going out of bus 30, so I'm gonna route that. And then we can choose which drummer best describes the sound that we're going after, the style we're going after. I'm gonna choose Pop Songwriter, and I'm gonna mute the nothing section. Let's drag it down here. And I'm actually gonna colorize our group vocals differently now because they're a little confusing. All right, so let's double click on this. And this brings up our kind of session player editor. And as you can see, since I'm signaling that this is a verse section, it comes in with kind of middle intensity and middle complexity. If I had put intro there, it would have been softer. Anyways, before we get into those controls, let's just see what it did. It's kind of not what I want at all right out of the box. So the feel is a little awkward. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna go to the details here, and I'm gonna mess with the push and pull. And I might mess with the humanize as well. You know, if humans don't play on a grid, so that's what that does. I'm just going to select what I wanna start editing, and I'll hit Command U to loop this section up. All right, so it took some doing, but I think I got a drum part that will work for this example. So let's listen back. So since these pre-recorded audio tracks were performed by a human, myself, you know, they have the idiosyncrasies that humans have. So it's hard to get these machines to play along nicely. I ended up having to make a manual pattern. So let's go over that window for a moment. So what we have here up at the top, these are the number of bars that we want our pattern to be. So 1, 2, 3, 4 bars, 4 measures. And then these are 16th notes down here. Each block of 4 is 1 beat. And then we can plug in what we want our kick and our snare drum to play. So take these out, and you would have the kick drum playing on the downbeat, snare drum playing on the second beat, kick drum playing on the third beat, and then again an 8th note later, then the snare drum on the 4th beat. And then I wanted to force this pattern. So I just kind of redid it for the next 2 bars afterwards. Then on the final bar, I kind of forced this little fill. If I were to use this in a final production, then what I would do is I would convert this to a MIDI region. So let's just do that. I would just right click, convert to MIDI region. And then what I would do is I would just create a new software instrument track, drag this down here. And on this instrument track, I would put something like Superior Drummer. And then I have a number of libraries in here, which I love and I'm used to using and mixing with. And what I would do is I would take this MIDI file and I would edit it a lot further to make it really tight to my playing. Because like I said, I'm not 100% on a grid, I'm a human. But in the interest of our example today, I'm not gonna do that. So let's just undo this. I'm just kind of showing you, if you're new to this kind of thing, what you can do, how far you can take it, how much control you can have. Because over this file right here, you can't really edit it that much aside from what you can do with these little windows here. So yeah, this isn't bad. It's just, I don't see much of a difference between this AI drummer and the session drummer that's been in Logic for a while now. You still have to mess with it quite a bit to get what you're going after. So let's see about a bass player. This is brand new to Logic 11. So we're gonna make a new session player track. We're gonna call it bass player, and let's just leave it as pop songwriter for now. And let's see what this guy did so far. Okay, it's a little busy and a little jerky, like it's pausing and stuff like that where I wouldn't want it to. So I'm gonna mess around with this and I'll be back in a second because this could take a half an hour. And we're back. Okay, so the bass I had to edit even more. So what I tried to do is I tried to make the bass follow the drum set, like the kick drum especially, but it just wasn't really working. So I ended up doing another manual pattern and I split the bass part up to get even more specific. Like for this 4-bar period right here, I just wanted the bass to play straight 8th notes. So I forced that through the manual editing. And it's kind of strange that I had to force it to follow the kick drum, which is what I thought it would do when I tied it to the track. So for instance, when I choose for it to follow the Bluebird kit, like it'll do it when I force more complexity into the playing, but it also gets more busy, which I don't want. I just wanted a simple bass part that follows the kick drum without getting too fancy. And it didn't matter, you know, if I turn the fill complexity all the way down or the fill amount all the way down, as long as I put this complexity slider up for it to force more notes, it would still get too busy for me. Okay, so that's the bad stuff. The good stuff is that it's impressive with its ability to go from section to section. Like for instance, it can like anticipate when the sections are gonna change, and it makes like interesting fills, interesting traverses, interesting bridges between the parts. Like that's really cool right there. I like that. Something else I couldn't get rid of is some of that jerky behavior that I mentioned earlier. Like right around here, for instance. Like what I would do if I was going to use this part is I would convert this to MIDI, and then what I would do is I would go into these short little stabs and I would choose the ones that I wanted to elongate, and I would just force them to be legato. So what I would do is I would just select them, right click, and trim note end to following notes, also known as force legato. And what that does is this. It's still not perfect. I might want to slide up to this note, which you can also program, but I can live with this a lot more than I can that jerkiness. Anyways, there's also a new piano player or keyboard player, and I'm actually going to expand more on this in our next example, but in this one, there is an option to make it a pad, so it'll just be like a bed in the background, providing some atmosphere. So let's choose that. Go to simple pad and create. I'm just going to mute out this part. Take it way down in volume, and then I'm also going to take the channel EQ and I'm going to cut out all that low end all the way up to 500 hertz, and then I'm going to slice off some of the high end as well. Let me just listen to that. That's really cool. I used to spend, you know, a good half an hour making pad background stuff, so that saves a lot of time. Just take that way down in volume and mix it in with the rest. And let's put on a compressor for all of our tracks. So I'm going to route everything to the same bus. And I'm gonna put on my new favorite compressor from Acoustica Audio. This is called Sand 4, if you haven't heard of it. Just to like glue all this stuff together and see how well it all sits together. I mean, for the minimal amount of fiddling I did, I'm pretty impressed with this. If I were in a studio and this was like a session bass player in real life and he was throwing some of this stuff around, and after a while I was just like, dude, just like chill, you know, play something more in the background, and he continued to do stuff like this, then I would probably fire him. Some of the stuff is really cool, like the doing. Okay, so we saw how we can incorporate this with pre-recorded material that we might actually use, but what I'm even more interested in is seeing how you can use these instruments as a sketch pad. So let's go on to our second example. Just a heads up, if you're taking away anything useful from this or any of my videos, then the best thing that you can do to help me out would be to like, subscribe, and comment. It's more difficult now than it has ever been to get a YouTube channel going, so all that stuff helps me out tremendously. Thank you very much. Do you ever use your phone as a sketch pad to get down rough ideas, or just when you're sitting around noodling on your instrument, you might want to just like hit record and see what happens? Well, that's what I'm going to do in this example. I'm going to use the AI session players to kind of throw some ideas at me. Here's just a little preview of what we're dealing with. All right, so I have this file here that I just pulled in from my iPhone, but first I'm going to go to the Logic project and change the tempo mode to adapt. And what this does is it will try to extract the tempo from the audio file itself. So I'll just dump this into the project and it analyzes it. Now I'm going to expose probably the worst aspect of Logic Pro, which I was really hoping they would do something about in version 11, but they've done absolutely nothing. Click show, and what this does is it opens up the horrible smart tempo editor. And as you can see, it thinks that my audio file is 252 beats per minute. It's not. It's probably around 110 BPM. So this is useless. It's very frustrating because, you know, I was just sitting around noodling on the guitar, and I thought it would be cool to mess around with some other elements with these new AI session players, which so far I'm kind of impressed with. But in order to get them to play nicely with this recording, I need to make a tempo map, and Logic Pro 11 has done absolutely nothing to update its horrible smart tempo editor. So I'm going to show you how to do it manually. First, I'm going to hit the divide by 2 button here, and that at least brings the tempo down to a reasonable 126. And then I'm going to change the time signature to 4/4, and now's the fun part. I have to manually hit the D and T keys to play in time with this little thing that I recorded. So every new bar, every new measure, we hit the D key, and on the subdivisions, we hit the T key. And we have to make sure that the edit window is selected. I'll just zoom in a little bit. And we don't get any count in, so we just have to start plugging away. And then after we're done, we can manually move the markers. And let's go. Okay, so as you can see up in the global tracks area, we have our tempo map, and it took me about 20 minutes to edit this 1.5-minute long file. I'm gonna double click on this file, and that opens up our tempo editor again, and I'll show you what I did. So here's the first bar, here's the second bar, and then the markers in the darker orange are the quarter note subdivisions. So the reason why these take a little long to edit is because since you're inputting them manually, you're not going to be 100% on. So you have to go in and you can move them around afterwards. So for instance, this one, I probably came in way too early and I moved it over so that it comes right in on that downbeat. And then I went through the whole file and basically did that for the whole file. So now we're ready to make an arrangement track and a chord track. So we'll do that. We'll show the arrangement and the chord. I'll drag this down, and I'm gonna hide our tempo track so I don't accidentally mess it up. All right, so just as a little refresher, we'll do arrangement, and it's gonna start out with some blank space again. Then I add another section, This is going to be called intro. Go to bar 13. Again, make another section. This is going to be the verse. That lasts for another 8 bars. Let's get some chords in there. It starts on C major with a G in the bass. And then if you have a chord change coming up in the next bar, you can just hit tab and that will go to the next bar. Then we can put in, it was a F major with a C in the bass. Then the next bar, we hit tab again, and it goes to A minor. And I'll finish chording out the rest of the song, and I'll be right back. All right, so I finished filling out the arrangement track and the chord track. And then in the interest of saving time, I just went ahead and added all the session players. And as you can see, I sliced them up in different parts to force them to play a little bit differently. And I'll focus in on the keyboard especially for this example. But first, let's just go ahead and listen back. So of course this is a demo, it's not supposed to be a final product, but there's a lot of cool ideas in there that I can easily expand upon and turn this into a full song with lyrics and everything. I gotta say that I'm especially impressed with the piano. It does take some editing to do this, but in the intro I forced it to play freely. You can choose different kinds of playing styles, and just messing with the details and the feel, the complexity, intensity, all these are very responsive controls. And Apple did a really good job of putting a lot of depth into the small amount of controls that there are. And you know, it is a little bit busy at times, but you know, I can convert all this stuff to MIDI and I can make it as simple or as complex as I want. The bass player was much easier to get along with in this example. I didn't really have to do much to it. And for the drummer, I really liked this pop brush style, and the samples really sound good. Of course, there is the laborious aspect of making this tempo map, but other than that, this is like one of the best, if not the best, little idea palette that I've come across. I mean, I love this little run on the piano in the beginning. So one more thing I do want to mention is that if you do use these session players as an idea palette from stuff that you pulled in from your phone, and maybe your instrument was sort of slightly out of tune or you were experimenting with alternate tunings, then what you can do is you go to File, Project Settings, and go to Tuning, and here you can adjust the global tuning for the entire track. So, you know, if you were like going for the spiritual thing, then maybe you would go down -32, or sorry, -31.9 hertz to get to 432 hertz, and then actually these session players would tune themselves down to you. It's gonna sound awful right now. But as you can hear, it works. So other than the fact that Apple has ignored any update to the Smart Editor algorithm, one thing that I would love to see is the ability to drop audio files into the project and just have the chord chart populate automatically. I can't imagine that Apple hasn't messed with this idea already, so maybe the tech just isn't there yet. But if there's already something like this out there that I'm just not aware of, then please let me know in the comments. However, what I do like about manually populating the chord chart myself is that it forces me to do harmonic analysis on my own music, which is honestly something that I've grown kind of lazy about, and I can't imagine that I'm alone in that regard. So anyways, I really hope that you've gotten something useful out of this video, and if you have, then you know what to do. Also, if you're looking for a producer or an engineer, then you can hit me up through comoproductions.com. This playlist about Logic Pro 11 will evolve over time, so stay tuned. Thank you for watching, and as always, I wish you all the success in the world. See you next time.